Welcome back to Books with Duddy. I'm back with another book, and we are talking about Not Quite Dead Yet, a fairly new book, or very new book by Holly Jackson. And today I will be just giving my spoiler-free review, so if you haven't read the book yet and you want to avoid spoilers, I will not be giving any spoilers in today's video. But I am excited to talk about this book, so let's get into it. Not Quite Dead Yet is a book about a girl named Jet who is murdered but has a week to solve her own murder. She is attacked and something happens and there's some issue in her brain, and she is going to have a deadly aneurysm in a week from the time that she wakes up in the hospital. And I thought this was just a fascinating premise right off the bat. I was hooked. Just the idea that you have a chance to solve your own murder. And, is that how you would spend your last week? I don't know. But that's how Jet decided she wanted to spend her time. So like I said, the plot for this hooked me right away. It's not the first time that I think this idea of, being able to solve your own murder has ever been done. But I want to talk about the characters, especially Jet, the main character, who I just loved. I loved her as a character. She was sassy, funny, witty, certainly not perfect. She felt like she hadn't really accomplished anything in her life, and she's a late 20s when this happens, and I think she's just relatable in a lot of ways of feeling pressure not only from your family or exterior pressure, but internal pressure that for whatever reason you really put on yourself that isn't caused by outside factors, which kind of sounds weird, but I really do believe that we can put pressure on ourselves that we just create in our own head. But throughout it all, she stayed funny, sassy, and all of those things, and we do see her character grow from the time of the attack and throughout the book of, really wanting to accomplish something. Because in the beginning of the book, one of the themes was she felt pressure, but she also really felt like she was only 27 and, she has all the time in the world to accomplish things. But as the book goes on, obviously she feels like she has less and less time and she really wants to accomplish something, in this case, solving her own murder. And, we also meet her family, her dad, her brother, her mom, who the family owns a construction business. And we also meet one of her best friends, or a couple of her best friends, and Sophia, who is married to her brother, as well as Billy, who is kind of her best friend, but they kind of lost touch over time. And all these characters were interesting. They had their own motivations. And as you might imagine, there is a lot of twists and turns in this book, and characters doing things that are surprising and some that aren't that surprising. But another thing I really liked about this book was the pacing. And I can't remember what other book I reviewed on this channel that I said this about as well. But the pacing was really nice because there was this timeline, right? This aneurysm was happening in a week. And so every day, there had to be a lot of progress made. And even though, that means that the story was kind of pushing forward a lot, as I said before, I still felt like we got to know the characters and their motivations a lot throughout the book. I found the twists in this book to be very interesting. I think some of them were a little bit obvious. But then there were some that I really didn't see coming that were interesting. And then there were some that I didn't see coming and I thought were just a little bit ridiculous. There's a lot of twists, a lot of red herrings in this book, which, even though I found some of them to be a little bit dumb, it definitely kept me reading. I wanted to know, why she was attacked, who attacked her, what was going to happen to Jet at the end of this book. So I flew through this book. I had never read a book from Holly Jackson before. If you've watched any of my other reviews, I think I mentioned this, but I used to read a lot when I was younger, and I fell off of it for a long time. And, I'm more getting back into, or I've gotten back into reading, so a lot of these authors I'm, discovering for the first time. So overall, I really enjoyed this book. I think that, it definitely was thought-provoking and kind of what I mentioned earlier, where, you're given a specific time frame of, the amount of time you have left and, what that's like to confront, your own mortality. This book was fast-paced. I think, like I said earlier, one of my favorite parts is Jet, just a great main character. And, the book had a satisfying conclusion in that, things were wrapped up. People's motivations came out and who did what came out. So overall, if you like thriller books, again, I don't think this necessarily reinvents the wheel, but this is a solid book and one that I really enjoyed reading. So I'm going to give this book a 7.9 out of 10. Just barely, probably not making it into the 8s. As I just think some of the twists, I don't know, just outlandish. But at the same time, the book was extremely entertaining, and I think that's the most important thing. So if you've read this book, let me know what you thought in the comments. I'll be having a spoiler reaction where I talk about the twists and all that stuff coming out soon or already out, depending on when you're watching this. But if you watch this long, I really appreciate it. And if you could like and subscribe, I'd appreciate that. And I hope to see you back soon.